Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Would the FDA approve it, then I am certain that Pentagon leadership will take a look at what our options are going forward, including the potential option of making mandatory.
Oh, making it mandatory. Have you seen this movie before? Yes. Those of us who were older than 22 remember it well. The Pentagon has forced soldiers to take untested experimental vaccines before. It happened in Iraq. Troops there had to take the anthrax vaccine. What happened? Many of those soldiers are now eligible for disability benefits through the VA. Look it up. Why? Because that vaccine caused serious long-term complications. Those included infertility, lupus, paralysis, blindness, neurological damage. Those effects were not obvious at first. They took years to surface. But on CNN, military analysts ignore that, military analysts, and are instead begging the Pentagon to force another unapproved drug on soldiers. And if those soldiers don't comply, they should be arrested immediately.
The president has the power to waive that and make those vaccines mandatory. And as he said in the past, he was going to leave up to military. And as much as I respect President Biden, I think he's made a mistake in punting this one. I think he should show the leadership and just go ahead and waive the informed consent requirement and go ahead and make that mandatory, just from a system standpoint. And then those who decide that they're not going to take it are literally in violation of a lawful order, and then they can face consequences under the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
You can go to prison for not taking the vaccine. It's funny. You invite someone like that on your show, and then he says something like that out loud with a television camera in the room, and you don't pause and say, "Ooh, excuse me, that's lunacy. That's fascism." No one says anything. Oh, of course, yeah. Court-martials for anyone who refuses to take an experimental vaccine to stop a pandemic that has already ended. What's going on here? It's so obviously unnecessary that it's vindictive. And it makes you wonder, what is this really about? At the very moment that the risk for young people of dying the coronavirus has hit essentially zero, they're telling us that young people, soldiers, should be arrested and go to jail if they don't submit to the vaccine. They're telling you that you will wind up in a government database if you don't comply, and the government agents could be showing up and knocking on your door. What is happening?
Correcting the record, restoring veterans harmed by the unlawful anthrax vaccine mandate. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social, Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. Well, the anthrax vaccine was integrated into my Air Force career and my family's lives from the very beginning of the first Gulf War to the post 9/11 anthrax letter attacks when we lived in Northern Virginia and I was at the Pentagon, my deployments in the global war on terror, and now post-COVID and restoring service members harmed by the unlawful military vaccine orders for COVID. The COVID debacle should have been prevented if we had learned the lessons of the anthrax vaccine mandate. That's not what happened. We did not. And that is why I want to highlight the story of those veterans permanently harmed by the unlawful anthrax vaccine and their continued fight for full restoration of their reputations and their very lives. Well, my guest today is retired Air Force Colonel Tom Remper. He goes by Buzz. Colonel Remper's memoir is called Unyielding. Unyielding. You can find it at Skyhorse Publishing. It retraces the anthrax vaccine history since it marked the first time the United States military was served with court rulings condemning premeditated illegal experimentation on our nation's troops. The invention of the COVID mandates imposed on the population in 2021 gave all the American people just a little taste of the mistreatment previously reserved for our nation's warriors. Legal protections enacted by the Congress to guard against medical experimentation meant to ensure safe, effective, and FDA-approved products were instead adulterated, a word in the blurb about Tom's book, adulterated to foist mandates on American society. Colonel Renford continues to lead the fight to restore anthrax vaccine harms veterans today and the fight to reinstate and restore COVID vaccine harmed veterans today, because the population is sizable in both categories. Tom, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Thanks, Bob. I sure appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm sorry we've never been able to meet in person. We've been connected electronically for several years now, but with this reinstatement, and I'll show Secretary Hegseth's video where he announced the part of the reinstatement policy later in the show. It's critically important for a couple of reasons to me, and I highlighted a couple of those. This anthrax thing has affected my entire career, and illegal orders have now affected my entire life almost. I'm almost 64 years old, and with the COVID thing, I've got to stand up and say something. And you did that. You wrote a book, and Unyielding is fascinating, the pieces of it that I've been able to read. And it's very important that people not only know about the book, but know who you are, because you're still out there fighting for restoration for service members that were affected by that vaccine. And you're weighing in to try to help the younger folks that are fighting to restore not only themselves, but their colleagues based on the COVID vaccine mandate. Were you like me, where you were in that population that had to take the anthrax vaccine, and that's why you got involved and wrote this book?
So I was part of the population that was ordered to take the anthrax vaccine. But during that time frame, 1997, 1998, I was actually selected to be on a commander's team to bring the chain of command concerns that we might have over the policy. And we rapidly discovered that it was illegal. So the Gulf War, first Gulf War context is very important early on in both of our careers. And so literally, almost 40 years ago, we had the Gulf War experimentation. And as a result of the unapproved medical products that were given to our troops during the first Gulf War and the Gulf War illnesses that resulted from those drug products, the Congress actually put in force a law, Title 10, Section 1107 of the U.S. Code, which said you can't experiment on the troops, and you cannot give them investigational or unapproved drug products. You have to give them their prior consent, also termed as informed consent. And so there was actually a law in place in order to try to overcome and try to stop the problems with giving experimental drugs to our troops, mandating those drug products from the Clinton administration. And so Congress actually put this law into place to try to stop that from ever happening again. And then a little less than 10 years later, they actually mandate an investigational, experimental, unapproved drug product on our troops in direct violation of the law. And so we brought all that to the attention of the chain of command at the time in 1998, and we refused the vaccine. Our commander, on my website, unyielding.org, under the opinions tab, there's actually videos of my commanders, videos that were released to us via FOIA, the commander actually implying that we were traitors if we did not take the anthrax vaccine. So, in our collective military history, I'm sure it's the same with you, I had never had anyone question my patriotism, my loyalty, imply that I was a traitor or not complying with a vaccine mandate that we told the chain of command, we reported to the chain of command based on our official tasking that it was illegal. And we were smeared as traitors. So Therefore, we did not take the vaccine, and we took the fight to Congress, testified a couple times, cooperated with the Government Accountability Office, multiple reports verifying the problems with the vaccine. And what we had presented to the chain of command over those early years reached back to 1985, where the Department of Defense knew they did not have a safe and effective vaccine product, and they didn't have a properly licensed vaccine product. They published a request for proposal to get a new vaccine, one that actually worked. To this day, they literally have not procured that vaccine. They also published in the Federal Register a license rule to try to get the anthrax vaccine properly licensed by the Food and Drug Administration. It was never finalized. So you had this proposed rule for a drug license dangling in the Federal Register for all of these years. And, approximately 15 years later, we called it out and we said, hey, this drug product isn't even licensed. You're saying it's safe, effective, FDA approved. Your own paperwork on Department of Defense, Food and Drug Administration letterhead prove that it's none of those things. And so ultimately, a federal court did concur and enjoined the program, placed an injunction against the program. It took several years. It wasn't until 2003. And they stopped the program. They stopped the mandate. They were able to ultimately get the drug properly licensed by the 2006 timeframe. But all the punishments that occurred from 1997 through approximately 2003, those were all wrongful punishments over an unlawful and illegal order. The federal court said, you will not treat our soldiers as guinea pigs. It's the federal court and the federal judge's terminology. And they declared the program illegal. And so for years, we've tried to get service members' records corrected. There were thousands that were punished during that time frame. And so despite the fact that today they do give anthrax vaccine, and technically they say it's properly FDA approved, and that the current mandate, very limited mandate, is legal. The reality is the 1997 to 2003 punishments and that program was patently illegal. And so for over the years, we've tried to get the records corrected, and I shared with you some recent victories of the latest record correction for a Marine Corps officer, which we can talk about more fully. But it wasn't just the Federal Register entries, the 1985 admissions that the vaccine didn't work, yet they mandated it anyway. They had also applied, submitted what they call an investigational new drug application. They knew the vaccine was investigational. So at the very core of this mandate, they knew perfectly well it was violating the law. The manufacturer had been issued notices of intent to revoke its license. The FDA inspection reports, the plant was basically shut down. The FDA inspection report said that the anthrax vaccine manufacturing process was not validated. So they, in the 1997-1998 timeframe, they foisted this mandate on the troops, and they knew perfectly well at the highest levels, not throughout the chain of command. Most of the people in the chain of command are just listening to the boilerplate script, and they don't realize, they think it's a legal order, but the top of the chain of command absolutely knew they were implementing an illegal order. And so it's that basis that ever since we've been trying to get the records corrected for the soldiers that were punished. I was not punished. My colleague, Lieutenant Colonel Russ Dingle, who was my flight commander at the time, we were not punished. We were highlighting the illegality of the order. I think they chose to go hands off with us. I was able to serve for a total of 32 years, just like you. And so one of my passions is that incredible inequity that they actually punished troops, gave them bad conduct discharges, dishonorable discharges, fines, demotions. They actually put troops in jail. In this corrections case that just came out a couple of weeks ago that we'll talk about, was a Marine Corps officer and helicopter pilot that was actually the most severely punished soldier during the anthrax vaccine mandate timeframe. He was sentenced to 7 months in jail. And so they've ultimately just within last couple of weeks, they've upgraded his discharge to fully honorable. So he's gotten some justice, but it's taken 22 years since his court martial.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to take our first break, Tom. When we come back, we'll see a little clip about Gulf War syndrome and the connections to this vaccine. But I want to talk more about this history, because there's some terms that I never heard until we get to the COVID vaccine. One of them is EUA and the history behind that. And I think you've been talking about it, but I want people to understand what's really going on here from the Gulf War to 97, 98, and into 2003. We'll be right back with retired Air Force Colonel, fighter pilot, and author Tom Renfer in just a second, talking about restoring anthrax vaccine military members that were harmed in that period. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
We should realize that the anthrax vaccine was never properly licensed. And I worked with a group that took the license to court, and we won our case. And federal judge Emmett Sullivan instructed the FDA to revoke the license of the anthrax vaccine, to redo it, to get a clinical trial for efficacy, etc. And immediately after that happened, Congress passed the PrEP Act, which created the EUA. So the ability to give Americans on a massive scale an untested, unlicensed product was a result of the problems with the anthrax vaccine and the Defense Department wanting a way to force the anthrax vaccine on soldiers, even after the license had been revoked. And so they slapped the first vaccine or drug in the world to have an EUA was the anthrax vaccine in 2005. And then the DoD immediately started demanding that every soldier take it again. And our group went back to court, and Judge Sullivan said, no, you cannot force soldiers to be guinea pigs. They're already risking their lives for their country, and they don't have to be experimental subjects for pharma. And he said, you may not mandate it. If they want to take it, then they can take it, but you may not mandate it, and you must you must post my ruling in every vaccination center in the military.
Wow.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and it's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking with retired Air Force Colonel and author of his memoir, Unyielding, about this issue, the anthrax vaccine unlawful order that was given through the years. But there's a whole history behind this, and you heard Dr. Meryl Nassner talking about some of the points Tom was making in the first segment. And Tom, I wanted to ask you about this term, emergency use authorization, EUA. Look, I flew in the first Gulf War. I wasn't stationed on the ground. We flew from outside to in, but never heard the term EUA on the anthrax vaccine issue at all, or even that it was still experimental when we were being told that we had to take it. And then in 97, 98, I got the first two in the series before it was stopped. And then in 2005, I was a squadron commander, and we were being ordered, you got to get your troops to go take the anthrax vaccine. And of course, I was going to go be first in line. But we started asking questions because we'd seen that the manufacturing facility had been decertified in the year prior to that, like you mentioned. So what's going on here with EUA, this PrEP Act that was supposed to prevent this? You've got the term EUA, informed consent, licensed, FDA approved. Step through those with us in the context of this anthrax vaccine, because those are important and should have been used to stop the COVID vaccine order, which turned out to be unlawful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all connected. The fact that they violated the law with the anthrax vaccine program and had the federal court ruling against them in 2003 led to their initiative to create a new provision, the Emergency Use Authorization, EUA, under the PrEP Act. And their objective was to be able to give the vaccine even though it was an unapproved medical product. And that's FDA terminology. Unapproved medical product is an EUA. It's unapproved. And but what's very important to note, Meryl was absolutely correct. We participated in that lawsuit together. And as a result of winning that lawsuit and the government being found not substantially justified for illegally mandating an unapproved medical product, the Congress basically, under the PrEP Act, gave the Department of Defense, Food and Drug Administration, the government, this ability to declare something emergency use authorized. And even though it doesn't have a license, and even though it's not approved, it still can be offered based on reasonable assertions of safety and effectiveness versus proof of safety and effectiveness. Anthrax vaccine was the first ever EUA, and that's why you never heard of it prior, because it didn't exist until 2005. It was used by the Department of Defense and the government to try to overcome the fact that the program had been enjoined under an injunction. And so I shared with you a link, and hopefully you can share it with your viewers, from the Federal Register, absolutely affirming that an EUA product cannot be mandated. It has to be voluntary, no penalty, no loss of entitlements or benefits. Can't even block somebody from deploying. It's all in the Federal Register. It was published in the Federal Register because they were concerned that the Department of Defense would end up coercing people into take it, even though it was acknowledged as an unapproved medical product authorized under the emergency use authorization. So
now, wait a second. Let me stop you right there for a second. Let me ask you. So I've been saying this. This is why I signed the Declaration of Military Accountability with the 231 young folks that got harmed by the COVID vax mandate. Just so people understand, if it's an EUA product, regardless of FDA approval, licensing, messaging, it cannot be forced. It cannot be ordered to get it. And you still have to have informed consent, correct? Even if somebody voluntarily takes it. Okay.
Yeah, and so the terminology is slightly different. They call it an option to accept or refuse versus the other statute for investigational drug products talks about prior consent. 21 CFR 50.25 talks about informed consent. The bottom line is all of these laws, all also in military regulations, are meant to protect our troops from being abused by experimentation. And so EUA, it's very important. The bottom line is the only reason it is an EUA is because it is an unapproved medical product and cannot be mandated. And so the Department of Defense with the anthrax vaccine program and that memorialization in the Federal Register affirms that EUA products have to be voluntary. And when the Department of Defense actually came up with the COVID mandate memo or directive in August of 2021, they actually said that they could only mandate fully approved FDA approved product, which did not exist. All they had was emergency use authorized product. So while their actual mandate, the letter was technically a legal order that can mandate FDA approved product, that didn't exist. All they had was EUA product. And that letter also says that that will be voluntary. So they violated the Secretary of Defense's directive. And that's why Secretary Pete Hegseth has affirmed to the nation and to all of our troops that the mandate was unlawful. They illegally implemented the mandate because all they had was EUA product, and they had to give our soldiers the option to accept or refuse that product.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. This is why I put you on Whistleblower Wednesday, because I did not know that this previous part had existed. This whole lead up all the way from the Gulf War, maybe even 1985, as you mentioned, all of that should have prevented that letter from ever being signed. It should have. Let me just ask you this. You've called the anthrax program a premeditated, illegal experimentation process. Why do you use that terminology?
So it was premeditated illegal conduct because in 1985, the government knew that the license had never been completed. And in 1997, when they were submitting investigational new drug applications because it was being used in an investigational unapproved manner, they knew it was experimental. And then when they mandated it starting in late 1997, 1998, the plant was shut down. The manufacturing process was not validated. They'd been issued a notice of intent to revoke their license. They absolutely, in a premeditated manner, implemented this program and tried to get everybody to accept their boilerplate script that it was safe, effective, and FDA approved when they knew every one of those things, every one of those features and qualities were patently false. And so, yes, it was premeditated law breaking, willful law breaking. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it. You and I swore the same oath. Our oath is to the Constitution. The Constitution's about laws. And they absolutely willfully violated the law with the anthrax vaccine program. Federal courts affirmed it in the uncontested federal court case where they ended up paying our attorneys $250,000, and the government doesn't do that unless they are not substantially justified. And when they paid them, that's what the government said is they substantially justified. You got to pay these guys their legal fees, and so we won uncontested. It's black and white. It's history, and that might be a good lead for us to talk about the recent case.
I want to get to that at the beginning of the next segment, but right now I want to ask you about the parallels between the anthrax vaccine program and the COVID-19 military programs, because there's more to it than just the vaccines. I mean, this goes into, if I'm correct in what I think I know, it goes into how the second push of the anthrax vaccine post 2001, post 9/11, occurred and why, and how the COVID-19 vaccine push occurred and why. Tell folks about those parallels. I think the FBI even confirmed part of it.
Roger that. And that's the main reason I wrote the book, because I had witnessed this bad behavior over the course of the preceding 20 years. And I saw them doing the same thing when it came to COVID. So on one level, you have this pattern of willful law breaking, right? The military leadership is blatantly, brazenly violating the law. So that's one pattern between anthrax and COVID. But the other pattern that's very, very important is, how did they promote this? How did they get away with it? How did they get everybody to look the other way, get scared? Well, they did it with lab, right? So in the 2001 timeframe, we'd been very successful in helping with a congressional report, GAO reports. It came out and said the anthrax vaccine program is being conducted in violation of the law, that it is inconsistent with the law. And so that report, HR 106556, unproven force protection is what that report was called. And I got a call from Karl Rove, advisor to the president, wanted my research. The only reason I was connected with him is I'd been working with H. Ross Perot. Perot had been sending me to meetings all around Washington, D.C., along with my colleague, Russ Dingle, who sadly passed away. And I make most of this effort a tribute to him, because he was really the intellectual founder of the intellectual arguments and founder of all of that work. And I just do podcasts and kind of repeat the information that he originally discovered. Karl Rove got Deputy Secretary of Defense Wolfowitz to do a review. Undersecretaries Aldridge and Chu did a review for Don Rumsfeld. They recommended that they cancel the anthrax vaccine program in August of 2001. And what we know from history is a month later, we have 9/11, and a week after that, anthrax letters go in the mail. And so what began as an honest review by the Bush administration, Karl Rove, Wolfowitz, Chu, Aldridge, Rumsfeld, to cancel the anthrax vaccine program and to respond to Senator Daschle's concerns about the punishments being meted out, instead ended up being anthrax letter attacks. And I was informed by the White House that they would no longer be dealing with this issue. Department of Defense will handle it from here. Literally the day prior to the first anthrax letter attacks. And ultimately, it accelerated the anthrax vaccine program. All oversight stopped. Senator Daschle stopped questioning the anthrax vaccine program. Senator Daschle's office was attacked. It took 10 years, and during that 10 years, I was providing all kinds of inputs to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, telling them you need to be looking at Fort Detrick and these scientists who had the access and the motive and the expertise. And then finally, 10 years later, they determined that it was basically, the anthrax letter attacks were basically a lab leak from Fort Detrick, letters mailed out, and the motive, according to the FBI and the Department of Justice, was to save the failing anthrax vaccine program. So I totally believe that they got the motive right. It took 10 years, and unfortunately, in that intervening 10 years, we ended up with EUA law, we ended up with PrEP Act, we ended up with Project BioShield, we ended up with billions and billions and billions of dollars going to Anthony Fauci and others in order to build this biodefense industry enterprise complex.
And that leads you right to the Wuhan lab, and we'll continue this after this break, Tom, because this is critically important. I don't think most Americans fully understand what's going on here. We'll be right back with retired Colonel Tom Remper. This guy's an American hero. His colleague, Russ Dingle, who's passed away now, are American heroes. They need to get this story out and into a wide population. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
Just tell when there's immense resistance and pushback to what you want to say. Because when I used to get meetings to discuss topics they didn't want to talk about with ministers, whether that was HS2 or the fact that Gulf War syndrome is actually a result of the vaccines that were given to our armed forces before the Gulf War.
Would you mind just quickly explaining what Gulf War syndrome is?
The fact is that a large number of service personnel who served in the Gulf suffered some very bad illness as a result, bad health as a result. But what we do know is from the data is that people who served on ships that never got near the battlefield, 500 miles away from the sarin gas and the burning oil rigs, they've got it. The French ship that served next door, they haven't got it because they didn't have the vaccines. When we've even got service personnel who were vaccinated, ready to go, but say had an injury or an illness and never went, and they've got it, but they never went to Iraq, but they were vaccinated. And the meetings you have with ministers about things like that, there's never any civil servants there because they don't want to take any minutes. Yeah, plausible deniability.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest is retired Colonel from the Air Force, Tom Remper, who's also an author of his memoir, and it's titled Unyielding. We're talking about the anthrax vaccine mandate on the military, its repercussions, its origins, and its linkage to the COVID-19 virus and the military mandate that occurred unlawfully there. And Buzz, before the break, you had just gotten up to in the part of the story where the anthrax reinvigoration motivation declared by the FBI that the lab leak came out of Fort Detrick, Maryland on the anthrax attacks in Washington, D.C. By the way, my family's post office was the Fairfax County Post Office where the poor worker died from that mail. I was microwaving all of our mail before anybody else was allowed to touch it during that time frame. So I take this personally, that someone in our government might have intentionally leaked that anthrax and those attacks in order just to reinvigorate a vaccine program so we could inject our military members involuntarily and by force of order with something that A, probably doesn't work, and B, is destroying people's health. And we'll talk about that in a second. But so the linkage between that and the COVID-19 leak in Wuhan is where you got to. Why do you think this is a parallel? Because of the way we've figured out the story? Because the government still hasn't fully declared it came out of the lab leak, has it?
Almost unequivocally, the government has declared that. The White House has declared it. The FBI has declared it. State Department's declared it. Department of Energy has declared it. CIA's declared it. The coronavirus origins reports from the Congress have declared it, and everybody caveats it to a certain extent that it's more likely than not, or most likely. So for all practical purposes, the common understanding for people that are listening and reading the updates and understanding the previous cover-up, yes, it was a lab leak from Wuhan with some level of shared culpability, responsibility, shared blame. That's what I talk about in the book. As far as the COVID origins, it appeared Occam's razor, most likely that it was a lab leak from Wuhan. And our administration, NIH Director Bhattacharya, just in the past couple of days, once again has affirmed that he believes it came from Wuhan. The president has said the same thing, but it's not political. They're not saying the Chinese are totally responsible for this. The president, the White House, they're actually being extremely responsible and actually saying there was a major breakdown, malfunctions, National Institute of Health, NIAID, Fauci, to some extent, were actually participating in funding, facilitating this research, if nothing else, the technology backbone, sharing the information that led to the development of the unnatural virus. And of course, it's pretty evident that there was a major cover-up by government officials to try to alter that narrative and say that it was a natural occurrence. But if it's okay with you, I will comment just a little bit more on that FBI report. Took 10 years. As a result of it taking years, nobody really wanted to open up the anthrax vaccine can of worms again. Senator Daschle was out of office. Nobody went back and said, hey, but we punished all of these troops. And the only reason this vaccine program got resuscitated, accelerated, revived, saved, which was the motive, according to the FBI, was because of these letter attacks. Nobody went back and said, well, maybe we ought to re-examine why Rumsfeld was about to cancel this program. And of course, they just let the anthrax vaccine program continue. And very fascinating. Everybody should be knocking on the FBI's door and saying, okay, so Daschle was attacked, and he was one of the highest level officials questioning the anthrax vaccine program. But in your report, you basically state that nobody had any inkling as to why he might have been attacked, even though the motive was to save the anthrax vaccine program that he was questioning. So it's ludicrous on its face. They said there was ostensibly no connection to motive as to why Senator Daschle was attacked. It's ridiculous. And so they should reopen that investigation, and as a result of that, maybe reopen the idea that the anthrax vaccine program was about to be canceled, and the recommendations to the Secretary of Defense were to procure antibiotics. The anthrax letter said, take penicillin. Up until that time, they remember this, Bob, but up until that time, they said, if you don't have the anthrax vaccine, you're as good as dead. But as it turned out, simple therapies, simple antibiotics, penicillin, which was literally penned in the anthrax letter, saved people. Saved, if there was prompt treatment, they would be saved. Pattern with respect to COVID. Similarly, alternative treatments regressed. So just the idea that there was the cover up by the FBI over the Daschle connection is, I think it's very important. And with respect to the UK lawmaker that you had the clip on about Gulf War illness, basically tied to the vaccines, I agree with that. Anthrax vaccine was the largest exposure. They did everything they could to try to not study it. That was my major effort with H. Ross Perot, was to try to get them to study anthrax vaccine. And he came to the determination that they want to say this is all about stress. They want to create a diversion. So my conclusion is, after all these years, is that Gulf War illness basically is anthrax vaccine. And the government has done everything they possibly can do to blame it on other exposures. Were there other exposures? Absolutely. Should they be taking care of groups under the promise to address comprehensive toxins? Yes. But they absolutely should add anthrax vaccine to that PAC Act, and they should absolutely include the COVID unlawful mandated shots to that PAC Act as well. And so
both of those should be amended to the PAC Act for toxic exposures. We got a hand up in the audience. I have a live audience here. Let's take a question from them for you real quick before we continue. Go ahead. Shell is our host over there.
We have Nathan, sir.
Thank you, Michelle and Colonels. I did have a question about the PACT Act, if there was amended or not, but I believe you already answered that. I agree it should be amended. I do have a majority of all the Gulf War symptoms, and I never did get to deploy to the box. The only factor is the Anthrax 2 series 2 separate times.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. We appreciate it. One more hand before we get to the break. Go ahead, Joe.
We have Southern, sir.
Thank you. Tom, in looking at the bills and things that got passed in Congress, it appears that EcoHealth Alliance was funded so they could fund the Wuhan lab, and that has now been proven in hearings. My question is, have we had this continually going on where they're funding it through another channel to move funds over for all this crazy gain of function?
Yeah, so the answer is absolutely. EcoHealth Alliance was receiving funding and was collaborating with Wuhan, and that money was coming indirectly from Fauci, NIAID, NIH, and they try to maintain that EcoHealth Alliance was not being candid with them about what they were doing. But the bottom line is the money from the U.S. government, from our taxpayers, was actually being utilized by EcoHealth Alliance, and as a result of this whole thing, EcoHealth Alliance has been decertified.
Yeah, and Bhattacharya actually was giving a speech to his organization that said that NIH funded the Wuhan virus, and about 30 people got up and walked out because they're guilty. They're guilty, Tom. The serious nature of this is I wanted to show the Gulf War syndrome clip because I don't think a lot of people know the connection. I mean, I kind of knew about it. But I didn't really understand it until very recently, and I wish we'd have gotten that into the PACT Act. I helped work on that, and I just didn't know enough about that. Do you know how many people have died, how many people have serious injuries, and whether they're able to get fair disability compensation and treatment from the VA in this whole category?
At one point, there were up to 150,000 troops that took anthrax vaccine and a similar number that were registered with the Gulf War Illness Registry. And so there were, literally hundreds of thousands of people. And as far as the anthrax vaccine and the COVID shots being added to the PACT Act, it can happen, whether it's something that the Department of Defense in cooperation with the Department of Veteran Affairs can do, or Congress has to do. They just need to do it. These were toxic exposures. They were acknowledged, unapproved, illegal, experimental, investigational drug products. I mean, what more fits the definition of a toxic exposure? They should be included in the PACT Act. But it's also a very important parallel. Yeah, another important parallel between anthrax and COVID is the idea that the government has created distractions and diversions to kind of get people off the mark. So Gulf War illness is anthrax vaccine illness, in my professional opinion, after observing this for almost 30 years. Long COVID, it's COVID injury after observing this, and many doctors are saying that as well. So once again, they created a version. They try to make it look like it's not what it really is.
Exactly right. We got to take our last break. When we come back, we'll see Secretary Hegseth's announcement about their restoration for COVID-19 vaxxers. I wanted to show that to give Tom a chance to talk about the case we've been skirting around here that just got resolved, some of it anyway, in April of 2025 about the Marine Corps officer. We'll be right back with retired Colonel Tom Buzz Rimpher.
We're back with more changes at DoD, and this time an update on COVID-19 and reinstatement. We all know that the previous administration issued unlawful orders on mandatory vaccines on an experimental vaccine, COVID-19. You know it, we know it. We're doing everything we can, as quickly as we can, to reinstate those who were affected by that policy. It hasn't been perfect, and we know that. We're having an ongoing conversation with you to get it right. Working with the White House as well. We want anyone impacted by that vaccine mandate back into the military, people of conscience, warriors of conscience, back in our formations. We hear you, and we're working to get updated guidance as quickly as possible. So kind of here's where we are on more guidance we're providing right now. So in January, the president issued his executive order. We jumped right on it. In February, I directed the department to take corrective action regarding this specific department's unfair, overbroad, unnecessary COVID vaccine mandate. We apologize then, apologize now for how it was done, and we want to fix it. So today, I'm signing a memorandum that directs the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to provide additional guidance to the boards that are reviewing these cases concerning the review of requests from service members and former service members adversely impacted by COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The guidance also will facilitate the removal of adverse actions on service members solely for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine, including discharge upgrades and less than fully honorable discharges for individuals separated for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. So we're trying to scrub all that, clean all that up. We'll also facilitate appropriate remedies for service members who have suffered additional career setbacks resulting from the previous administration's unlawful vaccine mandate. So that original EO addresses the unfair, since rescinded COVID-19 vaccine mandate imposed on warfighters during the previous administration. We know how bad it was. You know how bad it was. And through this guidance, which I encourage you to check it all out directly, because it's an update going even further than what we've done in the past, this memo is providing supplemental remedies for service members and veterans negatively impacted by the DoD defunct COVID-19 disease 20 vaccine mandate. So more guidance here that we think is really important in getting this right. And we welcome you all back as quickly as possible.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and my guest today is retired Air Force Colonel, fighter pilot, and author of the book Unyielding, which is about the anthrax vaccine mandate and restoring, doing the work about restoring the military personnel that were punished through that mandate. And we've got to take advantage of this moment in time. You just saw Secretary Hegseth there improving on the efforts to reinstate those kicked out by the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, but it has to go much further than that. We have a documented history here, and Tom Remper, my guest today. Tom, the Marine officer. Let's talk about the Marine officer who's Board of Corrections of Military Records. I think that it would be BCNR now, the Navy, since he was a Marine. His punishment, he was court-martialed. He got 7 months in prison. What was the other punishment?
He was not promoted. He had earned a promotion, and they rescinded that promotion, and he was discharged with a less than fully honorable discharge. So he lost his entire career. And so they're not correcting all of that. I mean, this is a reach back 22 years, but at least they're making his discharge honorable. So just like with these COVID corrections, I'm really grateful. I'm proud of Secretary of Defense Hegseth and President Trump, because they're the first ones that have actually taken these steps, admitted the unlawfulness. It's very, very profound, important, seminal events that are going on here. They've stripped away this inference of lawfulness. That inference of lawfulness, or that an order is inferred to be lawful, even if proven later to be unlawful, like the anthrax vaccine. It's a very, very important concept. It's been stripped by our top leaders away from the military. Nobody can say, well, we thought it was legal, therefore we're not going to do anything for you. The Secretary of Defense is making sure it gets fixed. I think that they could do better. I think that they should just reinstate everybody, put them back on pay, and not allow these same mechanisms and bureaucracies to kick the can. For the for the anthrax vaccine punishment cases that I've assisted with, a couple were corrected in the 2018 and during the first President Trump administration. They were corrected because he had the White House put out guidance to correct records, but they only corrected 2 records out of the thousands of anthrax vaccine punished. He was undermined by the Department of Defense. They kicked the can into the Biden administration, and all corrections were stopped until the case that just came out a couple weeks ago about the Marine officer getting his record corrected. So now we have 3 people getting their records corrected. And if you look at the ruling, it's really important. They try to they quibble. They try to say, well, it was legal at the time. So they're reaching to that language in the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the Manual for Court Martial to try to say, well, we thought it was legal, so it's okay. We didn't do anything wrong. Well, that's not true. And that's why that background that we went through early on is so important, because there was no mistake. They knew it was illegal. It was ineffective. It was questionably safe. It absolutely wasn't licensed, which meant it violated the law. So there was no inference of legality. To have an inference of legality, you have to have evidence that showed it was legal. Well, the evidence actually showed the exact opposite. It was illegal. for them to try to say, well, at the time we thought it was legal, that is a logic fallacy. So what they've created here, what's really going on is we have a fallacy of legality. The Department of Defense with anthrax is trying to say that, well, we thought it was legal, so we're only going to go so far in correcting people's records. But fortunately, they are giving honorable discharges to these guys that are applying. Yeah. The other two cases that I helped with during the first Trump administration, and I'd been directly working with White House officials and Department of Defense, Undersecretary of Defense personnel and readiness officials, and they did put out this guidance. Problem was, they didn't even mention anthrax vaccine in the memo. They tried to obscure it, and they provided no outreach. That they didn't even publish the memo. So what I'm asking the Department of Defense to do is do what you're doing for the COVID era veterans. Publish the guidance, provide the outreach. You should have the list of everybody that was punished. Send them all brand new, newly minted discharge upgrade certificates that say fully honorable. It's the least they can do. It's zero cost. And I think if President Trump, J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Hegseth understood what was going on here, the depth of the deceptions, and how proud we are veterans that they're actually doing the right thing for COVID era veterans, I think that they would redouble their efforts, go back in time, and reinitiate the corrections that President Trump tried to put into motion in 2018, but he was undermined. And that should make him mad. It made me mad ever since we've been trying to get records corrected. Now we have a third, once again, under President Trump, a third record being corrected. And there's also really important language in the ruling that talks about the fact that they should mitigate his court-martial. They should give him this honorable discharge because of the legal case, the litigation that found the program to be illegal. It's also really important that in that ruling, they talk about emergency use authorization. They talk about the Federal Register entry. They talk about the court process. They talk about the fact that emergency use authorized products had to be optional, had to be voluntary, and that all that coordination, all that language came out of the Department of Defense. So it's further proof that when the Department of Defense promulgated the COVID vaccine mandates, they absolutely knew what they were doing was unlawful. There was no inference of legality. It was patently illegal, both for the anthrax vaccine mandate and the COVID mandate. And the least we can do for anthrax era vets is go back at zero cost, correct those records unconditionally, unilaterally, retroactively. Don't make them apply. It took my first two guys, a couple Marines, valiant Marines committed to trying to get their records corrected, took them 15 years. And this latest officer took him 22 years to get his records corrected. And the Department of Defense, I'm sorry, but handing these corrections processes to the Department of Defense boards for corrections of military records, it's a can-kicking exercise by the deep state bureaucrats where they know they can bottle up and minimize the actual corrections that are occurring. They need to get on top of this. They need to unilaterally direct record corrections for our troops for both eras.
The really weird part about this whole story, when you put it all together from, in 1985 to today, Tom, is that it doesn't appear, now maybe I'm just naive and only looking at the surface, but it doesn't appear the elected people and the political appointees were the ones that were driving all this stuff. I mean, even Donald Trump, he's very proud of his Operation Warp Speed and the development of the vaccine in rapid time, record time, and those kind of things. But I honestly don't think the decision makers were getting all the right information at the right time, or any of the right information, really, to be honest with you. Is that the right perspective to have? Or?
Yeah, I think that the top leaders who are signing off on the decisions don't have the data points. I don't think they understand, and I think that the Department of Defense lawyers are playing games and trying to create illusions of legality. But like I said, these are just fallacies of legality, and so they have been deceived. Top leaders have been deceived, but there's a time where those top leaders need to actually listen to their honest, intelligent, educated, critical thinking veterans and current service members who are who are
Exactly.
telling them real time. We were telling them back in 1998, real time. Our troops were telling the Department of Defense leadership in 2021, it's illegal. You can't do this. And they were
Yeah.
blown off. The inspector generals were blowing them off. And
Mhm.
so the mechanisms that are supposed to provide these circuit breakers weren't popping. And the senior leadership were willfully blind, looking the other way, and there's no excuse for that. Their job is to be engaged, be the critical thinker, and not being allowing these inspector general cases, Article 138 complaints to be covered up.
Yeah. Well, I just got about 30 seconds left here. Your website, and I think there's a link to another site that helps people submit paperwork to the BCMR, the Board of Correctional and Military Records. I didn't find one for the anthrax vaccines, so I forwarded them that website. I think is linked on your main website. Is that correct?
Correct. So unyielding.org goes to my website. Basically, it's about the book. It's a tribute to my dear colleague who created all the arguments that won the day in declaring the anthrax vaccine program illegal. That redirects to a website called hopingforjustice.org using the number 4. So hopingforjustice.org. But just easiest to go to unyielding.org. Go over to the home tab on the left-hand side. That shows the process, the DD 149 form, the application to the Board for Correctional Military Records. So all of these guys have gotten their records corrected through this board process. Problem with anthrax vaccine era veterans is there's been no guidance, there's been no outreach. Yeah. There's thousands of people out there that have no idea there's even a possibility of getting their records corrected. These guys are getting their records fully corrected, fully honorable discharges. The first 2 gentlemen in 2018 were enlisted men, were given good conduct medals retroactively. They were granted back pay for while they were in the appellate judicial review process, and they were given their promotions back. The enlisted men had been demoted to E1. They were given their rank back, and that's so so the President Trump administration first term was trying to do the right thing. He was blocked. He should be pissed.
We'll tag them. We'll tag them in this one. Every one of them when I do the production version of the show tweet. We'll tag them and everything, man. Thank you so much for your service and for your continued service and for staying in this fight. You could have easily said, well, I've done my part, but you didn't do that, Tom, and we appreciate that. Tomorrow's Truth Thursday. We're talking to Bill Clinton's military aide who carried the nuclear football about Joe Biden's incapacitation and what should have been happening behind the scenes with the military throughout that debacle. We'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.